the year that I got skinny. This is about September of 2016, the day that I consider the very first seed of my skinniness, okay? It was the week of September 16th of 2016. Interestingly, it would be exactly 1 year later, September 16th, 2017, that I would begin my 1 meal a day eating that so many people know me for. But what was happening 1 year before on the same day? Let me tell you. Okay, let us begin. And I'm going to try really hard not to cry through this episode. Okay, I am going to try very hard. So it was 2016 was a Friday. On the prior Tuesday, just a few days before, I was at a board meeting, and our superintendent, who I mentioned in the introduction, she also struggled with obesity. I felt like we were sisters in that. She was just an older sister. And being older, she weighed a little more than I did too. And at that point, I probably weighed in the 250 to 260 range, and she was over 300 at that point. And she had a hernia, an abdominal hernia that many of us had. I had one. And she mentioned that she would be out of pocket for a few days. She was going from the board meeting to see her primary care doctor because she suspected that her hernia had become strangulated. And so anyone who, if you ever suspect that, you don't wait, you don't go to a board meeting, you go immediately to the ER and have an exam. But she was headed home, and she was going to go to the hospital to check on that. And so I went home, and it would be early Saturday morning that I would venture out with my kids. We were going to Utah we were staying in Cedar Breaks for a week. And as we were driving from California to Utah, we drove through the desert and through Las Vegas. My phone started to ring, but I was driving, so I wasn't able to answer it, but I was getting these calls. And then I was in nearly to Utah when I was able to take one of the calls. And it was a call from my husband at that point. I'd had other calls as well, but I answered this call from my husband, who told us that our superintendent had passed. And she died in the early hours of that day, so late Friday into Saturday morning. And that would have been September 16th into the 17th. And I was on the side of the road, parked, had my boys in the car, and I just sobbed. I just sobbed and sobbed. And we were really close to Mesquite. And so we drove to Mesquite, and we checked into a hotel. And I pretty much just fitfully tried to sleep that night. I was mostly sobbing and mostly thinking about her. And as I was trying to sleep, when you're in that fitful sleep, and you sort of feel like you're having dreams, but are they really dreams? And you don't know, because you can't even, just terrible, fitful, not rest. I was going to say rest. It's not rest. You're struggling to sleep, and then you have those little dream states. And I was there trying to sleep, and then I just was like this, because I remembered a dream. I didn't have a dream per se then in that moment, but I remembered that apparently before we got in that car and drove across the desert, I'd had a dream in my house the night before as I was sleeping. I couldn't remember the dream though, but my memory there in Mesquite in that hotel was, wow, I had a dream last night that Chris was trying to tell me something. So that as she passed, maybe, I thought, oh my God, as she passed, she came to me in a dream, and I don't even remember it. I don't even remember it, but I'm sure she was trying to tell me something important. And since, as I mentioned, we were kind of chasing down documents and financial issues in our district, and we were considering taking it to the district attorney for criminal charges. And so I was sure that as she passed, that she had a message for me about that, like how we could really get him. Okay, we have a good bit of evidence, but you always want that final piece, and what that piece would be. And I thought, oh my gosh, as Chris passed, she really found something and is trying to tell me, but I don't remember the dream. And you hear about people who have dreams of, when some, grandpa passes or something and that grandpa visits them in the dream. I've never had anything like that. And I was like, whoa, whoa. And my heart was broken over all of it. And so we that morning we drove into Utah and stayed in Cedar Breaks. And there was a nice hot tub in our hotel. And I remember just sitting in that hot tub and trying to remember the dream. I was trying to remember the flippin' dream because Chris was trying to tell me something and I couldn't remember what it was. And I called my sister and I said, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I can't remember this dream, but I know she was trying to tell me something, and it, very likely was about our project, and I want to know what it was, and I was just in agony, really struggling to remember this dream. And my sister said, you know what? You will not remember her message this way. You're just trying to force it. She said, you planned to spend this week with your boys. Go out with those boys, and you will get the message. And so, okay. Didn't see my other plan was working. And so I went out and we hiked. We went to the, ranger station, spoke to the rangers, got so much education, saw forests that had been burned some years before, beetle infested, the things that were coming to our own forest, and we were seeing the regeneration. We were learning so much about that. We were learning about all of this amazing geology, all this stuff. We were out hiking together. It was so impactful for us as a family. It deeply was. It was the very best trip we had had to date, and frankly, that we've had since. Very impactful. Touched my mother's heart so deeply, my own heart, as a mother to those boys. And as the week was winding down, and I realized there was something that I'd kind of thought with like the paperwork and that financial investigation. I thought, you know what, maybe there was this signature thing. And I thought, you know what, that's what she was trying to tell me. That's what Chris was trying to tell me, that signature thing. By the end of the week, as I headed back, I had the intention to go back and investigate that signature. But as it would turn out, we were so focused, my boys and I, on our newfound activity of this hiking thing that was so impactful. We left Cedar Breaks and we continued on a path of hiking. And I didn't end up with the time to investigate the signature issue. I didn't have the time. And over some years, I looked back and I thought, what does Chris think about me? She told me this thing about the signatures and I haven't followed up. Well, and oddly too, while I felt like I should in a way, I wasn't deeply impacted by it. I'll tell you, I typically would be quite the bulldog in that situation, but I was so focused on my boys and on the hiking that I never followed up on that. I never did. And I wondered what she would think of me. And so that was September of 2016 when she passed. And it would be January of 22 when I would drive through that area again in that highway and drive from Mesquite into St. George and then over into Zion. And as I went through the canyon and drove through, I was by myself. I was so struck. Emotion just hit me, just poured over me. I pulled over the car and I started to cry because I realized I do think I got the message from Chris on that trip, and it had nothing to do with signatures at all. It was the very beginning of the big goal at Eat Like a Bear, and it came to me on a trip to Cedar Breaks. Maybe a message from my friend Chris, who had a lifelong struggled with obesity and who died from a complication of it. She saw the big picture and helped to plant that in my heart. And I do believe that was a key beginning of what you see here at Eat Like a Bear.